So, welcome to Live Chats at Lunch. I'm here today with Marcus Pibworth to talk about life as a storyteller. Welcome, Marcus.
Hi, thanks, Daniel. Thanks for having this chat with me. It's very exciting.
It's great to have you. Marcus, tell me about your storytelling work. What does it involve?
It's a big question. I mean, lots of different aspects, but generally working with groups of people. I do sort of two aspects. One of it is performance storytelling, where I go and tell stories, usually to adults, sometimes to children, more and more to children since I've had my own children, but primarily to adults. And then I have sort of the applied storytelling aspect where I work in groups, community groups, basically run workshops where storytelling is sort of the part of it. And that's usually getting people to sort of either, I mean, sometimes I'll tell a story and that's a jumping off point to discuss about their own life. Sometimes they're more practical storytelling skills workshops, so how to tell stories. So there's a big range. They all
Yeah,
connect.
they are connected, and those different applications of storytelling are interesting. What is a way that you apply storytelling in your work?
I mean, at the moment, one of the big things I do is storytelling with dads. I have this thing called Mythic Fathers, and at the moment, it's a monthly meetup where I have some mostly local dads. I live in this beautiful place in Herefordshire. We've got a little bit of land. We have a yurt on it, and I mean the wider sort of idea and what we do is to bring people into the land, work on it. And one of those things I do is the storytelling Mythic Fathers with dads, and I'll do what I just mentioned. I'll have a story, um, a myth, and we'll sit round in the yurt. I tell the story, and then we chat about sort of various different aspects of being fathers, things we sort of relate to the story, that sort of thing, and over cups of tea. And it's very nice, but also very powerful.
Mm,
Yeah.
absolutely. And what is a myth that you might use to in one of those workshops?
Um, actually, good question. I sometimes I use sort of wonder tales, which are sort of more, I guess, fairy tales. Part of what I do is get grown men to sit in a circle and listen to fairy tales, and it's wonderful. And everyone gets a lot out of it, even though they might run a mile if you actually told them that's what they were going to do. And then myths. So one of the myths I've worked with was there's one called the Death of Balder, which is a Norse myth. It's sort of one of the sort of canonical Norse myths, and it has
Mm.
lots of things, sort of journeys to the underworld and um, communication with nature and lots of different aspects. And there's a yeah, and I'm a sucker for stories where people go to the underworld.
Yeah,
Yeah,
right.
yeah, and then I think the next one I'm going to be doing with the sort of Celtic myth. Um, yeah, and lots of yeah, lots of different ones.
Yeah. And I'm imagining a storytelling workshop with dads. Is it in a yurt? I've been in storytelling workshops that happen in a sort of enclosed space like that. Where do you do them?
Yeah, it's in the yeah. I mean, I mean, I had an iteration of this work with dads that I did online, and over lockdown, actually, I did quite a lot of. This was before I was a dad. Did sort of men's storytelling for men's groups or groups of men. Yeah, but the idea is once the weather picks up again next year, we're going to do a friend and I are going to put on a sort of more of a retreat where it's
Mm.
working sort of with the land, sort of building fires, whittling, that sort of thing, using the land around us. So I mean, we've got
Yeah.
sort of mountains and woodland and things, and I mean, telling stories outdoors is always the best for me, I find,
Mm.
and I think a yurt is okay because you're only separated by a sort of thin membrane of canvas. Uh,
Yeah, sure.
so yeah, that's generally where we do them. And yeah, I've got lots of plans. So one of the things we're trying to start up at the moment is this will be for the spring, is to have a sort of storytelling centre school here, which is focused on basically telling stories outdoors.
Mm.
Um, and that will be sort of mixed with some of it for children, some of it for adults, because that's sort
Yeah.
of the function. Yeah.
Absolutely. And so place is really central then to storytelling. And I'm imagining in a yurt, you're up close and you are enclosed. So a story of the underworld, there's something fitting there about that. And how could dads apply that? Is what understandings do you get about being a dad through telling that sort of story?
I mean, I think everyone takes something different away from it, but I mean, as you said, the space is the important was one of the important things. It's this holding space. It's not a space. I mean, a lot of the work I have done and interested in doing is with men and dads, and I think it's a space that isn't that natural for you to stumble across. I know that there's a lot of women's sort of work with mothers that involve circles and sort of talking about how you're feeling and supporting each other. But I mean, the reason I started this, the reason everything I do is always at some point rooted in a need that I have, something that I sort of wanted to explore or felt that I didn't have enough of. And I think once I became a dad, I felt it's very hard. I mean, because I work from home a lot and I do a lot of the childcare shared with my wife. I'm often at, dropping my daughter off at nursery, but there's not many dads there. So, a lot of the things do, I meet a lot of the mums. So it's sort of, okay.
Mm.
And through when I do speak to the dads, I found a lot of people had the same experience. And there was also a need I felt when I started putting out the word. I mean, some people looked at me like I was mad and ran away and,
Mm.
said, "Oh, that sounds good," and I've never heard from them again. But a lot of people
Yeah.
come, this is what I'm looking for. Count me in, and it's been a slow process of getting stuff together mainly because I have a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old,
Yeah.
and I moved to South Herefordshire, just on the Welsh border, when our youngest daughter was 2 weeks old, with big plans, and then
Mm.
realizing it's a miracle to get anything done with 2 children.
Yeah.
But
Right.
yeah, so
Yeah.
I mean, and this is obviously why there's a big focus on dad's work for me at the moment, because that is my sort of experience. And 3.5 years into exploring being a dad, making
Yeah.
mistakes, and growing and learning.
Totally. And I can see the value in coming together with other fathers and talking about that experience and working through that. What does storytelling add to that experience?
Well, what I found is actually before I used to, quite a long time ago now, I used to do sort of more focused around specifically around mental health, and I would
Mm.
have groups of people and would try and sort of often using personal stories, but still sort of more. It was like, can you share? Let's share what we come with, what we're holding, and it's quite hard to get a group of people, especially a group of men, together and to do that. But I found that adding a story changes that
Mm.
completely. It's like you're there, and the story is the thing that's holding you. I don't need to be wise. I feel if you ever come across a storyteller that claims to be wise, you should run the other way. The stories are the wisdom holders. The stories hold these sort of,
Mm.
some of it's wisdom that has come down for a long, generations and generations. Some of it is just confusing stuff that doesn't seem to make sense. Maybe it's because we've lost the meaning, or doesn't relate, we can't relate it to our own life or something. But all of the bits, they sort of, I think they help draw out what's going on in our own life. So for example, I'll tell a story, and I usually do a format where I'll, maybe the story is sort of half an hour long or 40 minutes long, and then I'll break probably twice during that. So we'll have the first third, then another third, then the final third. And each time we stop, sometimes it's with a question, sometimes it's just sort of what comes up. And people say, well, like the dad in that story was like completely the opposite of what I'm trying to do, or like was why did the king want them to do that? Like that really brings this up, and it reminds me of this, and suddenly everything is flowing much easier because the story has sort of given permission. And I think I found that really strong. I mean, it's not my own idea. I saw this is one of the things that attracted me to storytelling in the first place. When I saw there was an American sort of poet storyteller called Robert Bly who did a lot of stuff sort of in the 80s, 90s, well, up until he died 2 or 3 years ago, I guess. Now. But yeah, there's a big movement, and that inspired me. And so I like to use story in a way to sort of draw out from people what they really need to say or want to say, have the conversations that matter, but aren't really that easy to do, to have. But then the whole other aspect of it, I just tell stories because I think they're really fun and I really love them, and so the sort of more performance aspect of it is just picking a story because I really like the story. I've just started working on story, the Egyptian myth, Isis and Osiris, because I
Mm.
wasn't that familiar with Egyptian mythology, but I sort of have had that story in the back of my mind since for a couple of years. And it was only a few weeks ago that I thought, this one it's the time. For some reason, it's the time for this one. And I
Yeah,
haven't yet discovered exactly why, but um, I will as I tell it. But really,
absolutely. And
that's
for those who are, scratching their heads a bit about Osiris and Osiris, like me, I know the names, but I don't know much more about them. Can you say a bit more about that story?
I mean, Osiris is the sort of king of the underworld. They got the Egyptian underworld essentially, but the story is it's a story of sort of he becomes king. Isis is his sort of, well, it's Egyptian, so she's his sister, but also his wife. There's a lot of that in Egyptian mythology, but uh, yeah, she basically he's king, and his brother is jealous and locks him in a coffin and throws him in the sea, and Isis has to go and find him, and then she finds him, and then the brother Set rips him apart and throws him all over the all over Egypt, all his body parts, and Isis
Mm.
gathers them all up and gets them all back together, except one part, which if you read in a lot of books, they usually say one part was missing, and you think, oh, what part was that? Why do they not mention it? And then you go back to the original sources, or someone a bit more open, and it's they his penis has been eaten by fish, and so she has to craft the new one, and
Oh,
then by bringing him back together, she enables him to go down to the underworld and sort of rule as pharaoh rather than be trapped as a sort of roaming spirit on the earth. That's a very, very like
yeah.
synoptic version of a much uh, greater and bigger story that we don't have time to cover here. But
No,
hopefully
no.
one day when we do it, yeah.
No, it's I mean, like a lot of those ancient stories, it's wild. Is it metaphorical or figurative? Or does it become that way when you retell the story in this present time and thinking creatively about what it tells us about our lives?
I think that's the beautiful thing about these stories. You tell them, um, and in some ways you don't need to put a lot of thought into the sort of why of telling it. I know that I need to tell it, and then everyone that there'll be whys for me. I'll tell it because it's this or that. But whenever I tell it to other people, they will take away their own thing. They'll connect it to other things, often things that I haven't seen, or yeah, don't I don't. I think, oh, that's interesting. It doesn't do that for me, but I think that's why they're special, because they don't give you answers. I think stories are wonderful because these days we're so used to sort of having answers given to us, or like, oh, it's really hard to resist googling everything as soon as you don't know the answer. Um, certainly you can ask my wife that. I'm just always having to stop. Don't Google it. Yeah, but stories, they don't give you that though. They, they give you something deeper. I can't remember. There's a storyteller, Daniel Morden. I was doing a workshop with him a few while ago now, and I remember him. I think it was actually him quoting someone else, but I apologize to that someone else. Now it's Daniel Morden's quote. Said something like, "If you read a story, it goes to your head. If you listen to a story, it goes to your heart." And I think that's really strong and powerful about that.
Yeah. And there's an analogy there to music too, and the way music speaks to people. Is it, I've heard storytellers say, make the music with your story. And I've heard other storytellers, bring in musicians or music into their work. Does it have a role in your storytelling?
I Music specifically, I
Yeah.
think. Yeah, I mean, I have. Last year I did, no, this year I did work with some musicians, and I worked with some Georgie Buchanan who plays harp, and Alana Middleton, and they on the fiddle, and it adds another dimension. I think they both, yeah, because music does exactly that. It doesn't give you answers directly. It percolates through your body and gives you a more sensory experience of the world. And I think storytelling does the same. I think sometimes I've heard a story, and it's only years later that I've thought, something has just clicked in my head, and because of that story I realize why this happens or that happens, and you know and you don't know where they're taking you really.
And there's something uniquely magical about that combination, an instrumentalist with a storyteller, and that weaving together. I imagine that's your experience as well.
Yeah, I'd definitely like to do more of it. I mean, next year I'm going to work with those same musicians, and we haven't we've got a date, but we haven't worked out yet. We're going to put on a storytelling and music workshop, a sort of collaborative piece, to see what sort of, because there's so much crossover in what we do, and then we'll do some more shows together as well, because it's just a joy to do it.
Yeah, you've got so much coming up. We'll put a link to your website in the description so people can see what you've got coming up, Marcus. But that's all we've got time for today. Thank you for your time and telling us about your work.
Thank you. Yeah, sure. People get in contact with me, and yeah, I've got a lot of sort of local things and not some online things, and often in the summer I'm at festivals and things like that. So yeah, please do check out my website. And thank you very much, Daniel. I could
Yeah,
talk for hours. So yes,
yeah, I know,
yeah.
right? We can keep going. Fantastic. Thanks, Marcus.
Thank you very much.
Hi everyone, thanks for watching. If you'd like to see more of the same, then feel free to hit subscribe on our channel, or for more similar coverage, visit our website at www.thecuspmagazine.com. Thanks, and I'll see you another time.